Ensuring Success 2023. We are coming to you live from AMS Pictures in Dallas, Texas. We're so glad you're here with us today. We have a great session in store for you, but first I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, because it's our sponsors who make this event possible. So this year our sponsors include ADP, Avalara, BotKeeper, Canopy, Instead by Corby, CPA.com, eFile4Biz, Relay, WriteWorks, SafeSend, SureLink, Walters Kluwer, Xero, and Zoho. And in particular, this session is sponsored by Xero. And so also, I am Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor. And before we get into our topic, I want to explain for those of you who are just joining us how CPE works. There will be 3 breaks during the session when we will stop and hear a brief word from our sponsor, and then we'll return and we will have the CPE code that you need to record appearing on the bottom of the screen. And you will hear this sound to remind you that you need to write down that code and save it along with the other 2 codes you'll get for this session if you plan to if you're going to need CPE credit for this session. It's really getting, 2 days of this is getting long. Okay, so if you require CPE credit for this session, you'll get 3 codes. You need to save them. Then you'll go to the CPE link on our site, and you can download your certificates right there. Okay, that's how that works. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to introduce our speakers really quickly. And I'm sitting next to Aaron Berson, and then Annie Terry, and Wayne Richard, and my co-moderator, Alexander DeFelice. And I'll have each of them give you a brief introduction. Aaron?
Me? Okay. Hi, I'm Aaron Berson, founder of Fringe Advisory. We're a full-service CAS and TAS shop.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Terry. I'm a product operations director for the Xero Inventory Plus product at Xero, and I'm based in San Francisco, California.
And I'm Wayne Richard. I'm partner and COO of Bean Ninjas. We're an e-com specialist bookkeeping and financial management firm that's servicing customers across all sales channels and platforms.
And I'm Alexandra DeFelice, Director of Marketing and Business Development for Payne & Fears Law Firm in Southern California. I am Gail's co-moderator for all 14 sessions, and I am taking your questions, audience questions, which you will see under the streaming video. Please send them to us. The panelists love questions. And I am also your designated bell ringer for CPE.
Yeah, so below our screen it says ask a question, and you can ask a question there. It will get right to our speakers. And also, if you have any technical difficulties, you can post it there. Or if you just want to give us a shout out, you can do that too. And in speaking of shout outs, we are on social media with the hashtag DecemberCPE. So feel free to talk about us, take pictures of your screen and post them. We'd love it. So when we talk about e-commerce, which is what we're discussing in this session, e-commerce inventory, let's start with the fact that there are a whole lot of places where you can sell things these days. Everybody seems to be selling online. And just to get a feel for who our audience is and what your experiences or what your clients' experiences are, we'd like to ask a quick question of the audience about where your clients are selling products.
So we're going to give you guys 4 choices here, but each choice is kind of broken down, and we're not making you do a select all. So the first one is e-commerce channels, and then we're asking you which ones, and we're giving you some examples. If in the parentheticals when we ask which ones, you can just throw those in the chat. But so the options are e-commerce channels such as Shopify, etc., marketplace channels such as Amazon or eBay, POS. Such as POS Square, Clover, etc., and social channels such as Facebook. So we're throwing that out to the audience, and we can start the discussion here, and then we can see what you guys are doing.
Okay, so why is this a challenge that there are so many places out there to sell things?
Because there's so many places out there to sell things. I mean, one of the biggest challenges is not only tracking and understanding where our clients are selling, but then actually keeping inventory and available stock in sync across 5 to 10 different channels sometimes. So that's, in my opinion, one of the complexities.
I think technology has allowed for brands to get their products in front of more customers in a way that's never been seen before. So as customers, I know even last week, I'm using my phone to do Christmas shopping.
Yep.
So my expectation is that these goods now are available to me quickly. I have a chance to have more options available to price check against different stores. So the added convenience on the back end in the brands that we support has added a lot of complexity to what was pretty basic reporting before. You had a cash register and you had cash that was taken to a bank, and you could easily track what was being purchased and what was being sold. Now, as Aaron mentioned, you have multiple products, and the ease of getting those products in front of a large audience of customers distributed directly from Amazon or through a husband and wife packaging and mailing products out to their customers. It's just become a lot more complex with this advent of technology, but also customer expectation being one where we're all looking to have the greatest selection of product for the cheapest price sent to us in the fastest manner.
Yeah.
And that's it. You know, you can have a great idea and you can start selling it straight away. You can just, I can decide I want to have a side hustle. I can make something on my, on my spare time, and I can start selling it straight away. But I want to get it out to all the different people, and people like to shop in many different ways. Some people like to go to a store and touch it and feel it, and other people are just like, I just look at a picture and I buy it online at 2 a.m. because I'm awake. So you
Scrolling
need
TikTok.
exactly. So you want to meet all of those different customers, and then of course like if you do sell it to someone at a pop-up shop, you have to make sure that you account for that on the back end, so that when someone buys it online, you're like, you have to make more, you have to buy more to resell. So it's quite challenging. It's easier than ever, but that presents a lot more challenges as well.
The removal of that barrier to entry, like it used to
Exactly.
take at least a week to get a shop up
Yes.
online. Now, in 30 seconds, you could have a well-polished shop up on Shopify. You could be selling in 5 or 6 different channels with 5 clicks. Like that barrier to entry being removed makes all that so much more complex. I mean, we run into this situation all the time where we don't realize a client's in a new sales channel because they didn't tell us, because they clicked 3 buttons and
Exactly.
they're selling on TikTok Shop or on Instagram, and then we just see deposits coming. We're like, oh wait, we got to deal with that now.
And I think, Aaron, that's a great point. I think we as that support team to our customers take on the responsibility of identifying where do we find out within these new channels where how much sales have actually been generated, and create that linkage between those sales and the settlements. That TikTok, as a great example in recent months, having launched a new platform where you can scroll, see products you like, and those products are then available to you for purchase.
Yep.
Well, someone needs to recognize and do the research. Well, how do I understand the volume of orders that were generated, the proceeds and sales that were created from this amazing new sales channel? But also, how does that then link to deposits that are being made in my bank
Yes.
account, and how do I accurately account for those sales? And should they be accounted for separately from the other sales channels? How do I understand the profitability across different sales channels, with each having their own individual platform charges and payment processing
That's the fun
fees
part.
and fulfillment charges? So
That sounds like a full-time job just for that. It's like every session is one more job I need to have, right, as a firm owner or whatever. So how do you figure that all out? Are there, I know we say that, and a few people have asked, we're providing different resources and blogs and things like that. How the heck do you keep track of all of this?
yeah, I think it's a lot of time. You put the time and effort up front
And then
to
do you
track.
have to charge your clients for that time that you're putting in, or they just expect you to know?
Yeah, I think many of them consider, well, this is a money exchange, so you as the accountant are responsible for figuring it out for us, right? Your role is to deliver timely, accurate financial statements, and that's a key piece of it, is the sales element.
I think that also plays into a lot of anything else we do, right? They expect us to know the how to do it, right? That's why they're coming to us as outsourced providers and everything. So that's where we get to charge a premium if we're specializing in that space, because it is so complex. In my opinion, it's actually one of the more complex areas we have that we deal with because of all these nuances that Wayne was saying.
So because it is so complex, and another example I would think would be like sales tax, right? Is it not wise to try to figure it out on your own? Should you be partnering with another kind of service provider that specializes in this? And then how do you find that person?
I would say yes and no. It depends on your firm, right? Like if you're a larger firm and have the expertise in-house, you can kind of rely on that. But with the partners like Xero and what they're doing on the inventory, Avalara on the sales tax and everything, you can, as the outsourcer, outsource to the other specialists in that space. And I think it actually de-risks it for us as a firm because I'm a small firm. I don't have a 10-person sales tax
Right.
department or something to go research everything. So I think that helps de-risk it for us providing that service.
That is definitely something that we think is really important and something that we're investing in is certification and training and helping people up-level and upskill in this space. So we're seeing massive growth, but we also know that we need to prepare our partners exactly for that. And so we take that that's really important to us. We take that really seriously because we want our partners to grow their businesses. And so we're giving them the tools and resources to go off and do that.
Awesome. Okay, let's see we want to show the poll results, or do
Yeah.
we need to
Right
stop?
after we break quickly for CPE. So we're going to take a quick break for a very quick message from our sponsor Xero, and then we will be back with your first CPE code for this session. Welcome back, and on the bottom of your screen you will see the first CPE code for this session. So don't forget to write that down if you're planning on claiming CPE credit for this session about e-commerce and inventory. So we were talking about the various places where people go, and something tells me that's only going to expand. And we're not going to go back to brick and mortar life.
No, not
ever.
only, not solely.
Right.
And for your knowledge, this might sway the way the conversation goes, but 37% said they use marketplaces, 24% said they use POS, 19% e-commerce, and 17% Facebook. And I'm actually surprised that was so high.
The social side?
The
the
social
social
side
side.
for clients, I think sometimes they don't even think of it as selling,
I think they might not think of it of selling, but I'm actually surprised it's so low,
I
to
was
be
gonna
honest
say the
with
same
you.
thing. I think it's-
because of how
yeah.
easy it is and the reach that you get. Like we've had clients where they turn on TikTok Shop and then all of a sudden we're having lead time conversations with them because it sold out all of their inventory, right? And every other sales
Wow.
channel is now sold out because they got 10,000 orders in 48 hours, right? Where their average order volume was like 2,000 a month prior to that.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Like the reach is astronomical when you go into social. I mean, just look at the number of users on TikTok.
And the younger buyers, right? As-
Younger and more impulsive buyers.
Is there like a certain type of product that lends itself to social more than others?
Absolutely. I think when you have products that have a viral nature to them, where they're exciting to watch, they're quite unique in their appearance, they're more youthful in nature, tend to do better on TikTok in particular because that's the audience of TikTok. There's a different product set that might be more relevant on Facebook, where the audience tends to gear more older than it does. And then also through Instagram as a platform. But certainly there are products, just by nature, you can create more compelling content that captures your attention, and that then the more viewers at a significant conversion rate will lead to more sales.
Yeah,
Okay.
that visual component of it, right? Because those are visual,
Right.
Instagram, TikTok are visual networks, right?
Lower price points.
Okay.
Right, and lower price points and everything, but yeah.
And so Gail and I love horror stories, as Aaron knows, because he's been here for several years.
You don't
And
say.
just like oh my God, they want 40 times the inventory I have in stock. Like that's a word of caution. So if you have clients that are thinking about entering into any of these spaces, what words of caution would you give them?
Prepare. And, like do your due diligence, and like that example of going into like social if they're not in social before, just because there is that possibility for massive demand, right? To either, if you have the wherewithal to stock up on inventory beforehand, if you can, or just you could limit orders and things like that, where instead of just accepting everything that comes in on social, you can actually restrict it just like you do on other platforms. So preparing and doing the due diligence and getting a sense of what you actually expect to get in that, I think is really important. But that goes back to the part of actually having the conversation with us as the advisors, that you're going into a new sales channel, versus doing it on their own at 3 in the morning.
Right.
Right.
I think a lot of the conversation, particularly as a trusted advisor, is around cash flow, because all of these actions that these brands are taking all require capital.
Yeah.
So a lot of the conversation that we have with customers is around how can I get into a position to have product available in a way that I don't have too much product that's sitting in a warehouse, to which is drawing down my capital,
Yep.
but enough to meet the demand that's available to me by opening into these new markets. And the nature of e-commerce is just simply one where it takes a lot of capital upfront. You need to acquire source product, have product shipped from other areas in the world, most likely, to a warehouse. The product then needs to be stored in a warehouse and then listed on a marketplace or held available for sale. So, and then for a lot of brands, their growth is spurred through paid media. So it's advertising on Facebook and the different social channels that requires an upfront spend of capital to then get to a place where finally you have the reward, which is the order. So the nature of the cash conversion cycle is one where it just requires a lot of capital up front and a lot of planning. So as advisors, a lot of what we could do to support brands is get in front of that cash flow planning, helping them understand how to prepare for, but also how to negotiate with their suppliers so that they can receive terms that allow for them to better shorten that cycle between the cash outlay and that receipt of sales proceeds.
I also think software can really help you, but you know, the combination of your advisor and your software, and really, because that's where you can start to understand your true cost of goods sold. You were just getting into that,
Yes.
right? Like that's exactly where you're going, of like, you don't just make a sale for $100 and $100 is deposited into your bank account. You know, there's all these hidden fees with your shipping and your taxes and maybe what the platform that you sold it on took. And so you have to account for all of that to really understand what you've sold, and so that you don't end up completely underwater. So
It's interesting that you foresaw the question that I was going to throw at you as a software company employee. No, not yet. Don't go crazy. This was, how do you build a tech stack for this? You know, is there inventory support? Is there technology that reconciles sales to cash received? What are all the different softwares? Oh, more stuff I have to be on top of and buy. But Annie, what are the different functionalities? Let's put it that way that people need to be paying attention to.
So I think if you know, as you start and you're on one single channel, those marketplaces and those e-commerce channels, they do a really good job of helping you manage your inventory and reconcile that back to your books. You know, they have partnerships with like us at Xero and things like that. But as you start to diversify, that's when the challenges happen. It's kind of back to what we were saying of like, I sell on Etsy and I sell on Amazon, and I just went and did this, farmer's market for the holidays, and I sold out all my stuff, and now, oh my gosh, like I have to go and update it across all these places. And that's where, and that's something that we're building at Xero, which is a tool that enables you to, sell it in one place and update it everywhere so that you can aggregate and not end up back ordered. And, you constantly have your full vision and view of how your sales are going, what's selling best across which channel, making sure you always have product updated on each of those channels, and that's kind of the real power of it. And I don't think that pain happens until you you are on multiple channels. So there's lots of things. That's kind of a challenging question. Is you really have to understand what's where are you at with your business, and then what are the tools available to you, and then understand when finally do you need a tool like Xero Inventory Plus.
Yeah. I mean, I would say definitely that inventory management tool, right, to answer the question, right, or inventory/warehousing tool, depending if you're having stuff in multiple locations. You have your reconciliation items, like there's software that helps you reconcile, FBA with Amazon, because that's a beast of a reconciliation on its own. So there's software you can get that just handles that. So we as the advisors don't have to do all that. And then, a lot of the platforms like Shopify do a really good job of that upfront. I'd say on the simpler side, right?
Yes.
And then once you start getting into more complex stuff, that's where it really the importance of that inventory tool is.
Okay, so Aaron and Annie both said once you get to that point, how do you what are the triggers that you're at that point of complexity where you need to go to something better? Or sorry, don't use the word better, but more sophisticated. How's that?
I mean, I would say number of sales channels and also, but aside from that, intentionality, right? Because you could be selling on one sales channel, but if you want to intentionally plan your lead time and your capital runway and everything from that standpoint, getting a good understanding of your full landed cost versus your purchase price for all the goods and everything from that standpoint, that adds that sophistication where you need an inventory tool that can handle that so that your cost of goods sold is accurate and you're not essentially looking a lot more profitable than you really are.
And I think if we were to be honest, these brands, they're not started with the first task on the owner's plate to be to find a tech stack that supports their
Right.
accounting needs.
Correct.
So the narrative typically goes in almost 100% of our discovery calls, I need to move off spreadsheets and into a more sophisticated accounting system.
Yes.
And then the second part of that conversation is, oh, and by the way, I read on a blog post, I saw in a TikTok video, I should probably be on accrual-based accounting. And I think what we've been able to identify for them are platforms such as Xero that help us through partnerships address that conversion for them and then provide them the financial literacy to understand, because the nature of their business requires cash well up front of
Yep.
sale, how they can then align their accounting to have visibility and that certainty into those margins they thought they should be making within their business.
Yeah.
So as it's so often the case with small businesses, they wait till they're in over their heads before
Yep.
they contact an accountant.
Yep.
So someone comes to the accountant and they've got spreadsheets or just like worksheets that they've written by hand or whatever. They're trying to keep track of stuff. They realize that their business is growing and they need help. How do you address the issues with that client? What do you set out as the tasks that you would like to help them with? What's the accountant's role?
Yeah, I think as I introed, it's really providing that financial literacy and helping them understand how to build a tech stack and have a system that can provide them the timely, accurate financial statements, particularly for e-commerce, structured in a way so that they understand the big levers they can pull in their business to help drive greater profitability, but also how to understand the connection points between Amazon as a major sales channel and this accounting tech stack and their integrations in. A lot of times people see, wow, I noticed there's a direct integration between this accounting platform and this sales channel. So I'm going to go and just let it happen because the marketing says it's going to automatically handle everything that you're supposed to be doing as an accountant. And because they're in Shopify as well as Amazon as well as TikTok, there may be a flood of information that becomes noise. So I think initially the conversations about where we are today, do you like the story you understand in their business? And many of them are coming to us because there's been a pain point. They either have close to run out of cash, they felt like I'm driving all of these sales, but at the end of every month, I don't see the proceeds in my bank account.
Yeah.
And it's the conversation and showing them that cash conversion cycle, helping them understand and remind them of that need to outlay cash well before, but when showing them those margins on an accrual basis, it's like, that's where I thought I should be.
Yeah.
And then the conversations can move on a bit deeper into integrating into more sophisticated platforms based on the size, scale, and complexity of the brand.
So interestingly, I snuck a poll in there just to see what was happening because you guys are talking about it. The question is, are your clients currently utilizing any of these inventory management systems? And the choices were dedicated inventory management system, inventory management offered via e-commerce, 3PL system, shipping solution, your GLs included inventory management products, Excel, or nothing. What do you guys think was the number one response?
Excel.
Followed by?
Nothing.
Yep.
Yep. Not surprised at all.
So, is there education, even like, so you're not having to clean up the Excel? Are there tips that you can give them just how to make that? If they're going to be using this and you can't get them to use something more sophisticated, what can they do within Excel to make it better?
Man, I think though that is a great opportunity for an accountant and an advisor is to help them figure out like to get off of Excel. I think Excel, everyone is using it and it is so hard and so painful. And so giving them, getting them off of Excel is kind of, I think, the right path forward. And so it's kind of what Wayne was saying is like, and the role of an accountant can be everything from going in and like restructuring a warehouse, which sounds crazy, but like what is your most sold item? It should be at the front, so you have really easy access to that. It can also be like to your point earlier of like where are you today, but where do you want to go, and what are the tools and resources that we can use today? What's our growth path forward? What are the tools for financial insight so we can forecast to that? So there are a lot of different things that the role of the AB can be, and that can be from advisory all the way down to implementation of a product, to support of that product and on. But I think step one is get off of Excel.
Because they're also spending probably a tremendous amount of time maintaining that Excel, right? Like that data has to come from someplace. If it's coming from a system, it can probably be connected into other things, and they don't have to do that. If it's coming from them personally, well, that's where they're spending tremendous amounts of time that we can take off their plate.
But also what's been exciting is, of course, we can't ignore the growth that's happened in e-commerce as a result of COVID.
Yeah.
People were forced to bring their stores out from the brick and mortar shop online. The opportunity that's presented is that's a nice market for software vendors to come into. So what we've been able to see is, in addition to a low-cost option like a spreadsheet, are there now cloud-based options that do help cater to smaller brands where the cost is kept reasonable. They're cloud-based inventory management solutions. They can be dialed into different sales channels, accounting platforms. But more often than not, the advice is very similar to what you may hear from a personal trainer. It's, stick to the program you're going to continue with.
Yeah.
So if you're someone that you just have an avoidance to online data entry, well, maybe a cloud-based solution isn't going to work because you're not going to use it. So I think a lot of it just comes in understanding with our customers, what are you naturally inclined to continue to use? And then we can help you support there. And if you can't commit to supporting any of our systems, then it creates an amazing opportunity for us to say, you know what, we have a team that has the expertise that can come alongside you, remove this headache, because it is such an important factor in your monthly financials. I mean, it's unlike services businesses. It's not that people are their largest expense, it's product. And product is costly if it sits on a shelf unsold, or it's also costly if you're underbuying and have pent-up demand and people are going elsewhere to find products because you're out of stock.
Right.
And with that, I think we need to take another break, Cal.
Yeah, it's time to break one more time for a word from our sponsor, Xero, and then we'll be back with your second CPE code for this session.
This is awesome.
And we are back, and we'd like to have you call your attention to the bottom of the screen where we're displaying the second CPE code for this session. So be sure to write this down if you expect to request CPE credit for this session. All right. We were talking about software before the break. When an accountant is helping advise their e-commerce inventory client about software, hoping to let them do a lot of the work, what should we be looking for in the software that the client would want to use?
The end client or the accountant?
Well, both
Or-
actually.
okay.
So depending on who's doing the work, and
I think in all cases, cost, of course, is a factor. I think anytime you're asking a customer to implement a piece of technology that you're recommending, you need to address the elephant in the room.
Cost of the
because
technology.
very much it will be the cost. I think another factor to consider is the complexity of integration. These systems are not easy to just plug and play. It often takes a third-party integrator if you are working with an established brand with warehousing across Amazon and third-party logistics companies and a bit of stock held in their garage that they send to influencers and friends and family, and where, if it's apparel
Right.
or beauty stuff that they're using on their own. So you need to both understand what's the lead time and how complex is the integration going to be, and do you have dedicated time and team that can be put on that responsibility. Cost is probably the other big factor that we have a lot of conversations around when considering the range of options that are available.
Yeah, time commitment is a big thing that we look at also, like of the owner or of the person at the client who needs to actually do this if we're not doing everything for them, right? Because they need to be able to budget for that and actually have, whether it be an hour a day, hour a week, 10 hours a week, whatever it is, depending on the complexity. But if they don't have that, it's going to set up that whole integration for failure.
That's
right?
it. I also think it's like you have to understand what your business does. So do you do manufacturing? Do you do outsourced manufacturing? Do you need warehouse management? Do you need pick paths and wave picking? Or do you have simpler needs and you really could just get away with your e-commerce channel and a shipping solution? So
Right.
I think you really have to understand the complexity of your business. And then there's things that that customers, when they're selling their stuff, they don't even think about, like tax. Like, you need to understand when you've hit Nexus in a certain state. And, Amazon does a great job of helping you do that. But if you're not on Amazon, you have to maybe manage that yourself. So I think there's all these different things. And I think that's the most important reason why you need advisors. Software only gets you so far, but your advisor is the person that says, like, did you think about this? And, you really actually need this, and it's time to, do that. So that's important. Like that, that's the key, I think, right there.
That's an interesting point about sales tax. And you said Amazon does a great job. What about the others? The other third-party vendors that will let you sell your products online? Does everybody have a sales tax solution or not?
Most of them do. I think they vary in level of complexity, right? Like some of them we've run into where there's luxury tax in certain jurisdictions because they're selling, jewelry or something like that. And in most of them, that is not even discussed or an option that you could do. So we've had a few clients that think they're in compliance because they're using, let's say, Shopify to do sales tax that doesn't have that understanding of the nature of the product being sold versus just that it is being sold. And we've had people run into issues with that, and then we have to clean it up. So I think on the sales tax side, again, it comes down to understanding what the business is, what you're selling, and then what are the potential pitfalls of that, where maybe using the built-in sales tax option is not good enough, where you need to do something like an Avalara or a third-party integration onto that.
I think it's presented another amazing opportunity where now we're seeing firms that are dedicated to solely delivering sales and local tax services.
Yep.
That's the entirety of their service offering. So what I believe, added complexity only provides more opportunity.
Yep.
And I think a lot of it is in our role as educators to our customers, also being in that position to understand, as a firm, are you built to address these particular compliance needs? And if not, who are the resources and key partners that you can lean on to help address that? Because in the end, it is, to Annie's point, it's kind of that three-legged stool, right? You have software, customer, and a trusted advisor that really keep everything, in a level ground.
Yeah.
Well, and is it because of like the post-COVID influx in e-commerce activity that there's more of a need for like people who are actually focusing their practice specifically on e-commerce?
I think it's in the
say, yeah.
changing rules around sales tax as well. They had the Wayfair
The Wayfair decision really
absolutely
made that forefront and added a tremendous amount of complexity, right? So to your point, every time we add complexity, there's another opportunity for us as advisors or to specialize in that. But I think COVID definitely accelerated it, right? Just like with anything and like everything, and even in our profession, it accelerated. A decade was done in a year, essentially, of advancement. So I think it definitely made that happen faster, but I think it's just the complexities that's really driving the opportunity and the need for advisors in this specific space.
But to add to that, the states got savvy to the idea that
Yeah.
there's a new rise of stores
Yeah.
or
Right.
businesses
Yeah.
that now have an influx of sales into my state that I need to claim my piece of that. And sales tax was the mechanism to which they could do it. So now where the sales channels are different, there's a lot of debate amongst the e-commerce community around whose customer really is this.
Right.
Where Amazon is different because at the end of the day, it's Amazon's customer. It's not the business. We're on Shopify. That is your business's customer. You have access to the customer data. You interacted directly with the customer. So it then becomes a different dynamic when you're addressing some of these compliance needs like sales tax.
So Wayne, maybe this is a follow-up question, but it's whose client is it? This question came in, it said, I have a client that buys unique items and then plans to resell them over time. No two items are alike, so any thoughts on what type of system to account for this inventory? It might be an Annie question, but
Yeah.
I was thinking reselling, so whose client is it?
Right. So that's the other thing to consider is when you're selling different things, where are you selling them? So like in my mind, that's a great customer for something like Etsy. You know, there are different marketplaces also cater to customers that want to buy different types of tools or different types of products. Excuse me. So like that would be great for eBay or Etsy. Probably not a good place to sell. Like you would never sell that product on Amazon. But yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. I think you know, we're building a solution that you can have. You know, and every business is going to be different. There's businesses that are going to have like low volume of SKUs, but tons of inventory and low volume SKUs. Or this customer is going to have high volume of SKUs because they're going to have one, but they're only going to have one of each of them. So that's the other thing to consider when you're looking at software. How do they manage? Do they let me have lots of SKUs, or do they have order limits? Do they have product limits? I think you have to consider that when you're starting your business. So for this customer, right,
Yeah.
they're going to have high SKUs, but low inventory in each of those SKUs.
And then to the conversation around whose customer, it really comes down to the sales channel
Yep.
they choose to use to list their products and sell them.
Yeah, and like, are you selling through a marketplace or direct is really that
Yeah.
conversation, right? And like Amazon is known to be a marketplace, right? Walmart is known to be a marketplace. So that's why they collect a lot of the sales tax actually, because those are the rules in a lot of states, but not every state is the same. And that's the complexity side and the opportunity side as advisors.
And the added complexity is that now that Amazon is storing inventory in states
In
to which you
multiple
may
states,
have
yep.
sales on your other channels,
Yes.
you then reach
Yeah.
a place where it may trigger nexus in those states, regardless of the orders that you're receiving, the sales volumes.
Well, there's also some states that it triggers sales tax nexus just by you storing it there. Like even if you have
Exactly.
zero sales to there,
Exactly.
so day one that you do, you have to collect. And that's where when everyone's in all these different sales channels, if they're not looking at it globally, they actually don't realize that they might have nexus in 30 states, but they just never were looking at all the aggregated stuff together.
Tax is really hard.
Yeah.
When you, it's going to be really hard. And when you sell something, it's not even just where you shipped it to; it's where you shipped it from, and it's so it's you. Well, man, tax is hard. So I would say, we have a partnership with Avalara. It's really important to us. But your advisor, I think, you need to.
You guys should almost co-host this session, right? Because
Right,
it's like
it's very related.
there's all
Yes,
of
it
these red
is.
flags of like when you don't realize that you're having nexus in other states, right? So
Yes.
we won't go on that tangent since
But
we've
on
already
the
had.
inventory side, though, right, knowing where your inventory is
Yes.
in an inventory system is important. So, like,
Exactly.
multi-warehouse locations is important. Having the ship to and ship from address on every PO or sales item that you're sending out, like if you're looking and evaluating different systems, those are important factors, right? Because that's what's going to allow you to be able to do that study of, hey, do I have nexus in 30 states or not? But if you don't even have that data to begin with, that's going to make it a lot harder. So,
And yeah, that makes it multi-location. And as you grow, right? When you start, your location is your garage or your mom's house or your
Right.
grandma's
Yeah.
house, right?
Yeah.
But as you grow, like Amazon is a location. Your FBA.
and then they have lots of locations as well. So.
Right. So you have to be able to track that in your inventory tool.
Yeah.
It's really important.
So Gail, I think, has a question.
So when we
already.
talk about the accountant's role in all of this, One of the things that I think sellers really rely on their accountants for is helping them decide how to value their inventory. So the big methods, LIFO, FIFO, weighted average, how do those methods fit into e-commerce? And is like one method the best for an e-commerce shop, or does it depend on what you're selling or where you're selling it? Or
And I'm going to ask the audience what they recommend too, but I'd like to hear from the panel first.
Yeah, I would start by saying it is heavily reliant on the products that they're selling. And I think most software provides a nice intro to a solution that helps best match. So for us, based on the product set that we're supporting customers in their sales of, we tend to lean toward the weighted average because there's not major fluctuations in some of those cost of goods sold and the ancillary costs that come about alongside the order to warehouse movement of their goods. But when you do have more significant changes, then some of those other methods become more relatable.
Yeah, I think it also depends on kind of the market that customer is in, right? So if they're in increasing cost market versus decreasing cost market, right, it starts to skew things if they're using weighted average, let's say, versus LIFO or FIFO. So I think also understanding a bit more about their environment plays a factor into that to give them the best data to use for forecasting, right? So I think it depends a little bit on the nature of the product being sold and the environment.
results?
Yeah, let's see what we got here. Okay, so 50% basically said FIFO, and followed by weighted average, but that was only 21%. Specific identification, 16%, and then LIFO, 13.9.
I think specific identification's interesting as well. You have a lot of scenarios where, as a side hustle opportunity, people are identifying unique products and listing them on eBay or having them available on Etsy. And to the prior question that was asked, I'm procuring unique products.
Yeah.
That method is
Really the
typically the
only way
best
to do
because
it,
you
yeah.
only have one or few of the particular item. You know exactly the cost
Right.
you paid to acquire the item, the cost that was incurred in maybe freight into the warehouse. So you can identify all of that cost and simply move it across your balance sheet to your P&L when the goods have been then sold.
Thank you. I think we need one more break, Gail.
We do. We're going to break one more time for a word from our sponsor, Xero, and then we'll be right back with your third CPE code for this session. Welcome back. We are now displaying on the bottom of the screen the third CPE code for this session.
Wayne, want to do the honors?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. So be sure to write this code down if you're planning to request CPE credit for this session. So we were talking about costing inventory, and then since the accountants get to take part in the intricate stuff, what happens when we have things like partial shipments or even returns or damaged goods? How does that all play into how you value your inventory?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is a lot of conversation and education is required to be shared with our customers. More often than not, there's never been any attention placed on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
It's simply been that cash basis accounting where, well, that's product, so that was my cost.
Yeah.
And that education really is at the forefront of how we then begin to share that movement of goods from purchase from a supplier through the transfer of those goods across sea, air, whatever freight method is used to then warehouse, how to account for it when stored at warehouse. So our journey really starts in that education, and then the technical aspect of, it's an asset until sold, and then once sold and shipped, then we can move that cost in alignment with the recognition of sales. is where we begin to really address kind of the accounting. But first, it's really that initial education of here's a balance sheet, and here's why it's important, and here's why inventory is more important, and it's the largest number on their balance sheet more often than not. So here's why it's critical. And then getting into intricacies, I know a lot of specialist e-com accounting firms have begun to dig into breaking down inventory into different numbers, subheadings essentially. So we use one, we call it goods ordered, not received. So you've placed the order with your supplier and they may have provided a partial shipment. So we're able to identify how much is actually in a warehouse available for sale versus how much is sitting on a ship. So what is the value of that inventory? And then that education through the inventory order to buy process really comes about through the accounting rules.
Yeah, we actually sit down with every client and do that education where we're flow charting out their specific inventory life cycle, if you will,
That's
from
right.
order through the sale. And then we actually point out every point in time that there's another cost that is added, because if you track inventory to value it where you're doing landed cost, right? So then inventory is actually not just the cost of the product, but the cost to get the product to you so that you then expense it. They then can start understanding, okay, the freight added a cost, the people at the port that were taking it off, the duty, everything else that took it to get to the warehouse is now all part of your inventory price. That helps them start to understand, oh, that's why this should be $1 million, not 700, right? And that starts to help them. And then we use that as a tool to then dovetail into the more advisory side of, because it is their biggest number on their balance sheet, well, now if they need some financing to help get some more product in because they're starting a deal or something like that, well, then we can start looking at some inventory financing options or other ways to get them funding. But we can only do that if that's actually an accurate number on their balance sheet.
Yeah.
Right.
So we tend to work with brands in a similar manner, but the questions even earlier become ones that, wow, I started this as a side hustle alongside my 9 to 5. How do I know when I can take a livable wage from this business? So it's getting to a place in understanding the entirety of those variable costs so that we can truly share with them how much contribution margin, how much fuel do you really have after increasing sales, increasing advertising, left to cover those fixed costs and the wages and salaries you're hoping to pay out within your business.
And that's interesting because we did have a poll question that might be related to this, which is what type of financing are your clients using?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the audience, and then if you guys can just discuss it. The options that we're giving to the audience are short-term lines of credit, inventory-based lending, credit card or personal loan savings, traditional debt, purchase order financing, or none. Are you seeing changes from the past in what people are using? Are there recommendations that you make?
I mean, I think we have the conversation, and favorite answer, it depends, right? But it depends on the type of inventory they have, the lead time that it takes for them. Like I have one client from when they place the order to when they sell and collect on the invoices, it's 6 months, right? So that time frame, they don't have the wherewithal to be able to float that cash, right? So they are doing PO financing, and then they get that into actually seller side receivable factoring essentially to float that for those 6 months. I mean, it's expensive for them, but that works for their model, right? So I think it depends on the model. Like if they had a 30-day turnaround time, they wouldn't have to do any of that, or maybe just a little PO financing or something.
And listening to those options, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
They use all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of times it's important to remember who the customer is. And the customer is often not this big established brand that has these financial resources to allocate all this capital up front. So the needs and the options have become more available to brands as well. We certainly have seen a rise in working capital loans and even the sales channels. Shopify has their own working capital loan program.
Clover has their own.
Right.
They all,
Anytime you log into your American Express, there's a new, bar that comes across.
You're
been
pre-approved for 25
Right.
Great. So you're right. It's all over the board, and but almost for a tie is short-term lines of credit and inventory-based lending. I don't know if this is a good transition or not, but what about collections? Is that more difficult with selling on these kind of things versus collecting from in a traditional way because it's like harder to find people because they could create fake profiles or use a temporary credit card.
There's some risks, but I think it's actually easier to collect because
Yeah.
95% of it is paid up front.
That's right.
Right? When the order's
Through the
coming in,
sales channel.
right, through the processor or whoever, most of it's all credit card based, right? But there is a need to monitor for chargebacks and things of that nature for those fraudulent items because it does happen, right? But just so that you understand, and then that's our role as the accountant when we're doing the actual reconciliation to make sure that, hey, you were supposed to get $10,000 this month. Did you get that or not?
Right.
And more often than not, they didn't. They
Right.
didn't get 10,000
Oh, yeah, they got
because
less fees
the
and-
platform fees, the shipping channel fees, there's the FBA charges at Amazon. So I think it's not as big a factor in collections, but really the opportunity for accountants is in that matching of what the sales channel has told them their gross sales number is
Exactly.
and the actual deposits that are being made in their
Yeah.
bank account. So that sales settlement accounting has really become a tricky task that we've had to uncover and find those resources to help us support.
Right, because that's that cash management side of it to help them with, right? Because they expect, if they're not the most sophisticated, they expect I'm getting $10,000.
That's right.
When they're really getting like 5.
Right, absolutely.
After all that.
Reconciliation is
So, so
challenging.
Gail, we just have about a minute left. Were there any key takeaways or that you wanted to go over?
Well, we want to briefly go over how can accountants help grow their e-commerce business if they want to move into this field. What are some suggestions?
Their own e-commerce
Yeah.
business. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean
They're,
to
like,
serve
vertical.
e-commerce clients.
Yeah.
So back to one of the things I was saying earlier, I mean, Xero is creating tools to help, accountants and bookkeepers level up into this space. So we have training, we have certification. We want to partner with you to serve the clients together. So, we're a great place. Come to Xero. We can help, but there's lots of resources out there. And I think to the earlier point, this is not going away. This is,
Yep.
People are only going to start buying things more places. Everyone wants to click the ticket, so this is an awesome opportunity to get into this. So, and there's lots of resources out there.
Yeah, I think doing the research up front is where they need to start with, right? Because when you get your first e-com client, it is so easy to screw everything up if you haven't really thought through all the things we've been talking about here. So actually understanding that and maybe getting a basic tech stack that you'd recommend to someone and understanding how those work, how they integrate, because they all even feed information in very different ways, right? And sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. So doing that forefront research, I mean, just like we did before we became accountants, right? We went to school to learn how to do it, to then do the thing. So this is no different, right? It's just another specialty that we can offer as advisors.
I think to add on Aaron's point, to understand this is different than traditional retail.
Yeah.
So in the same way in which you launched a firm that was dedicated in serving industry customers in retail, look at e-commerce as an amazing opportunity to establish a specialization within your firm because the accounting needs of our customers are very different and complex. So it really takes dedicated resources to understand how those intricacies can best be served and what tools and resources we as the trusted advisors can come alongside these clients to present in front of them to really put them in the best position to grow.
Yeah, and I think just that deciding that they want to get into this complexity is an important thing that they need to decide up front because it is ever changing, right? Like just the amount of change in the last 5 years has been
Right.
insane, and that's only going to continue.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you everyone so much. And thank you all for being with us this session. As we have mentioned before, when we post the videos for these sessions on our site, which will be within about 2 weeks, we will also alert all of you through email and provide you with resources that build on the information that's been provided in this and all of our sessions. So we're finished with this one. We'll be back at the top of the hour with a session on approachable advisory, so don't go away.